The Missouri Compromise challenged the Northwest Ordinance because it was above the Ohio River.
The terms of the Missouri Compromise was the South would get Missouri and the North would have a new line drawn at the 3630 line.
The North did not like the Missouri Compromise because it allowed a slave state over the predetermined border of where slave states and free states would be. Meanwhile, the South, on the other hand, loved the compromise because it allowed a slave state. The North get out of the Missouri Compromise.
No more slave states above the 3630 line.
The Compromise of 1850 was caused because after the Mexican-American War, they gained a lot of land, which they had to decide on which land was slave and which land was free.
The Compromise of 1850 was a compromise that would allow California into the Union as a free state, which would please the North, while at the same time it allowed New Mexico and the Utah territories to decide whether to allow slavery, which would please the South. In addition, it also included that the trade of enslaved people would be banned in Washington, D.C. Compromise of 1850 question. Who was the Senator of Kentucky?
The Senator of Kentucky was Henry Clay, and he made the compromise.
The reason violence started happening in Bleeding, Kansas was because a bunch of anti- and pro-slavery settlers came into Kansas to sway the votes.
Eventually, pro-enslavers from Missouri attacked a settlement on the border, destroying printing presses and raiding houses and stuff. And so the North was outraged by this and saw it as a disgusting act. So John Brown and his sons invaded another enslavement settlement called Pottawatomie.
Where did the raid happen at the time of Bleeding, Kansas?
This happened at Lawrence, Kansas.
Charles Sumner wrote a speech about the crime against Kansas. He described the assault as violent in an innocent territory. He dismissed Douglas as a nuisance, an offense. Sumner also heaped abuse on many Southerners.
The North congratulated Sumner on the brave and noble speech he made. 2 days after the speech, a relative of Senator Butler, South Carolina Representative Preston Brooks, attacked Sumner in the Senate, beating him with his metal-tipped cane until it broke.
The North viewed the attack on Sumner as another example of Southern brutality, and the South viewed the guy who beat Sumner as a hero.
Who beat Charles Sumner?
Preston Brooks.
During the Dred Scott case, the Supreme Court had to figure out two questions. One, if Dred Scott even had the right to be in Supreme Court, and two, if he had the right to be free if he was in Wisconsin.
The court answered those questions by saying that Dred Scott had no right to sue and that he wasn't even a citizen in the first place.
What was the outcome of the Dred Scott case?
Oh, Dred Scott wasn't allowed of his freedom. The Lincoln and Douglas debates. Lincoln thought that the country could not have half of it that wants slaves and half of it that wants slaves. Lincoln thought that it was a moral issue, not a legal issue, and Douglas thought that the country could have half of it be slave and half of it be free states.
John Brown's goal was to give guns to the slaves to start a slave rebellion.
The result of the attack was that the Marines came in and captured John Brown, sentencing him to death.
True or false? The South thought John Brown was a hero.
False. The election of 1860 was controversial because Lincoln won, even though he only had 40% of the votes.
Who won the 1860 election?
Lincoln with 40% of the votes.
When Lincoln won the vote by 40%, Southerners were outraged by this. So, unanimously, South Carolina decided to leave the Union.
Who was the first state to secede?
North Carolina.
Wrong, it was South Carolina. Let's get them, boys.
No, please don't. I'm sorry.